My name is Laura Eisenhower. I am a researcher. I am also an intuitive astrologer. I research things like galactic history and exopolitics and metaphysics. And I'm also an experiencer. I was recruited to go off planet in 2006. I'm also the great granddaughter of Dwight David Eisenhower, and I worked to shed light on the secrecy that took place in his administration and all the things that have been kept from the public that needs to be exposed and disclosed. I feel like there's a very much de-weaponized version of these higher technologies, and if it's in the right hands, these technologies can be disclosed to benefit humanity instead of enslave humanity. So I always wonder, have I really met MJ12 members? I do know that I came across a branch of the MJ12, which is the Aviary and the Aquarium, which is sort of a think tank group that deals in extraterrestrial contact, but they present themselves as being researchers of this, where they study different cases of abduction scenarios. And I did meet some of those individuals when I was recruited to go off planet through a partner that I was set up with. And this particular group has a link to MJ12. They have their hands on ET technology. And they're actually, as much as they have a front of being investigators of this UFO phenomenon, they actually are the ones that are doing the military abductions and gangstalking, and they have their hands on psychotronic weaponry. So they're very much involved with targeting people and gangstalking individuals. And so that was the group that I was dealing with. And I was pre-targeted before birth and throughout my whole childhood and adulthood of their different tactics of targeting, including placing plants in my life in order to kind of trip me up and steer me onto this timeline of going off planet. And when they presented it to me, they presented it as a positive thing, but they have a link to MJ12. Other members, I'm not sure who all the members are, but I know my mom hung out closely with probably some of these individuals without realizing how dark they actually are, because of compartmentalism and because they want to convince well-intentioned people to go along with their agenda without revealing the depth of darkness that those agendas really hold and represent. So I was recruited to go off planet. I don't have memories so much, maybe more past life memories and some of the dreams that I've had. I've done hypnoregression, but I wouldn't be surprised if I, might have been, taken or might have gone to Mars or had more of a link to the things that have taken place in the secret space programs. But as far as what I can recall and what has taken place in this incarnation, I was recruited to go off planet. They said it was for my protection. I knew that was a lie. They said I would have a leadership role on Mars, and that it was to protect the human genome in the event of greater catastrophe. And this links to alternatives 1, 2, and 3 that the Jason scholars talk about in the Eisenhower administration and their connection with speaking to Zetas about future scenarios that might compromise humans' survival, like in the event of humanity being wiped out, that these colonies were to protect the human genome and be able to continue with the human race. I believe that some people that were the recruiters were well-intentioned and believed that that was why some individuals should be chosen to go to a Mars colony. But because of my research in things like geoengineering and HARP and chemtrails and all these different things, I know that there are a lot of engineered events that would appear to be apocalyptic, but are engineered because of how they can use dark technology to create things like superstorms and false flag events that stir up the public's fear in order to maintain control, and also depopulation agendas. And I could see sort of a mixed bag with the recruiters, that some were privy to this darker agenda, but some weren't. And so they wanted to convince me to go by kind of propping me up into this sort of like great position. And I was doing something like really important for the human race. And they convinced my partner that they used as bait that he was doing something really benevolent. But I researched all these people when I found out their names. I found out their names through my partner, who was set up to bring me in. And upon researching them, I discovered that they have their hands on this technology and they're responsible for things like MILABs And just like we see with our governments, they create a facade in order to convince people of something, but there's something else going on. And I realized that. That's why I refused to go. What took place after the Second World War, when Eisenhower was about to become president, there was an unconditional surrender treaty that took place under the administration of Truman. And 1952, this was after Project Paperclip. 1952 was before President Eisenhower became president. And what the unconditional surrender agreement was all about was surrendering pretty much to the Nazis. This was after Admiral Byrd's expedition to Antarctica, which I believe was in 1947. That didn't go well. And this was around the time that UFOs were flying over the U.S. Capitol and the White House. And the unconditional surrender treaty basically means that we did not win the Second World War. And the Nazis were able to overtake and infiltrate all corporations, medical industry, and what we've seen with Project Mockingbird and the infiltration of media and school systems and pretty much everything that has created massive indoctrination programs, with massive MK Ultra projects, secret space programs, and many levels of the MK Ultra. And as we see, like, you know, chemtrails and geoengineering, and where a lot of this alien technology ended up, you know, really just spreading itself throughout the world. And that Project Paperclip wasn't just infiltration of the United States. It, you know, was Nazis fled to all sorts of governments all over the world, very much so Australia. Lots of whistleblowers have come out about what they've experienced with the abuses, because the deep state and elitists not only have their hands on this level of technology, they're involved in satanic ritual abuse and human trafficking and pedophilia and all of those kind of things. So that has sort of been what took place. And Eisenhower, realizing this and that he couldn't really do anything about this unconditional surrender treaty, he was put in the blame position. He has been known for being the one that signed the Greada Treaty. And my research has shown me through people like Elena Danaan and Alex Collier and Dan Cooper, senior advisor to the Earth Alliance, that he did not sign the treaties. He had no access to this information. It was done behind his back by MJ-12. But because they want to cover their tracks and not be exposed, they decided to put the blame on him. And for the decade that I've been doing events and conferences related to disclosure information, I was always exposing that, yes, he might have signed a treaty. And in the last year or two, it's become very, very clear that he didn't sign any treaty. He might have been present for maybe one of the meetings, Elena says, but he was not authorized to sign anything. And so he set up the White Hats. He set up Ikes Force, a branch of the military called the USMC Special Section, that had to do with people that have been in the 20 and back and that had been maybe in Dark Fleet and other levels of the secret space programs, where they were put in a position to play a more positive role for humanity. So there was Ikes Force, MC Special Section, and his sort of creation of the Earth Alliance and his communication with Val Thor, that led to the Sphere beings and the Guardians being involved to then put a barrier eventually around the planet in 2014. And there's been a lot of sort of confusing information about that, and I can't prove anything, but this makes the most sense to me with all the whistleblower testimony I've heard over the years and the particular individuals I've talked to that have made this very clear. So the White Hats, the Earth Alliance, and Ikes Force were things set up in his administration that he did in secrecy to offset the unconditional surrender agreement, which he was not wanting to surrender to or be in agreement to. So him, along with a lot of other benevolent type leaders and people, just put this in the works. And all he really could do is warn us in his final speech of the military industrial complex. But what I've come to find out is that he put a lot more in place to protect us in these times, even though maybe they're not doing the mass arrests or everything that people are saying about, the White Hats. There is a positive force, but they're not going to save us. It's up to us to step up to the plate and join in so that we can be a greater team and a unified front in order to take down the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance. As far as I'm concerned, with what I've learned about what's going on astrologically, cosmic and earthly events have taken place to ensure that there has been a defeat of those darker forces. But because of the mind control and social engineering and all the different psyops that they use, they're still hijacking much of humanity's consciousness and minds. So we have to do all we can to help wake people up.